Okay, I never wanted to be around the guy. He's a liar. Roger Stone's a liar. Paul Manafort are liars. Have you seen the pattern here, right? These guys are all going to jail, are all liars.
Former Trump campaign managers Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie are here with me now. They're also the authors of the new book titled Trump's Enemies: How the Deep State is Undermining the Presidency. Thanks, guys, for being here with me today. I want to talk about the deep state. There's still a lot of people to this day that call it a conspiracy. So what is the deep state, and how exactly is it undermining Trump's presidency?
Well, first of all, anybody with that's been paying attention to Washington over the last 40 years knows the deep state exists. It's not a conspiracy. It's not some tinfoil hat thing. It is the people from the Clinton administration, from the Obama administration, that embed themselves into the permanent government, that are here for 30 and 40 years on, that these big bureaucracies of left-leaning individuals, those folks, without any real Trump supervision, if you will, because of crying Chuck Schumer's hold on 300 plus Trump appointees in the Senate. We don't have our political people in these agencies. So you have these deep staters, these people who burrow themselves in, who slow walk the president's agenda, who ignore the president's agenda, who do the opposite of the president's agenda. That's what we talk about in our new book. But we also talk about the deep state being the intelligence agencies and law enforcement, the FBI, the Comeys, the McCabe's, the Clappers and Brennans of the world, that really, during the campaign, right? We all know about that during the campaign, during the transition, and now in the first 2 years of president's term, have tried to delegitimize and undermine this president at every turn. And we've never seen this type of activity before in America, and it's dangerous. And this president needs to solve that over the next 2 years to make sure it does not happen again in America.
And Corey, David's talking about the claims that the Obama administration potentially used some of the intelligence agencies to spy on the Trump campaign during the campaign and during the transition period. Now, of course, we would have never found out about this had Trump not won, and no one was expecting him to win. But now all of these things are unraveling, and we're learning a lot about what's going on, yet no one's really getting in trouble.
Well, this is the hypocrisy. This is the hypocrisy of our intelligence community. What we know is they leaked information to media outlets. So those media outlets would write a story. They would then take those stories and make a FISA application from those stories to the FISA court. Then they would spy on American citizens because they didn't agree with them politically. This is unheard of in American government. And Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Bruce Orr at the Justice Department used false narratives, single source outlets to go and spy on people with no accountability. Andy McCabe has had a criminal referral from the IG for lying under oath on 3 separate occasions, and they have not prosecuted him yet. It's amazing how there's 2 separate sets of rules, one for conservatives and one for everybody else. If Donald Trump didn't get elected, we would not know about the insurance policy. We've seen the text messages between the lovers, Strzok and Page, how they would do anything they can to stop Donald Trump from getting elected. And we now know Jim Comey leaked classified information to a law professor to make sure it got out, so that an independent counsel was started and an investigation began on this whole fake Russian collusion story.
Yeah, we also know that Comey's very political. I mean, they're not supposed to be political. But after, he was fired, we learned about his wife and his kids being at the Women's March, which is kind of odd. And also, we saw him campaigning during the midterm election, supporting Democrats, and he's been very active on Twitter. I don't know if you saw that. Meantime, I want to jump over to the Mueller probe. This is something that you talk about a lot in your book. And, the Russia collusion narrative. 2 years later, there's really no evidence to suggest that there was any sort of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians to steal the election. And Mueller appears to be closing in on Trump's inner circle. We know that several advisors have admitted to crimes or have been convicted since the election. Also, today we're finding out that Trump's former personal attorney and confidant, Michael Cohen, pled guilty to one charge in the special counsel's investigation. So what's your reaction to this?
Well, let me just start by saying Paul Manafort and the charges that he was found guilty of and then subsequently in a second indictment pled guilty to, Michael Cohen's guilty pleas, and some of these others, the Papadopouloses of the world, these issues have nothing to do with Donald Trump. That is, when you say he's closing in on the Trump inner circle, yes, did he get Manafort? Absolutely. Did he get Cohen? Absolutely. Were these bad guys who did bad things? Absolutely. But they didn't have anything to do with the campaign, meaning the crimes. They weren't about Russia collusion or cooperation. They were about evading taxes and laundering money. That's what Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort were doing. And it was years before Donald Trump was a candidate for president. Now, it doesn't mean that these guys are good guys. It just means that they didn't have anything to do with our campaign.
Yeah, so it's like he's investigating people and then finding crimes, right, Corey?
Well, that's what he's doing. And look, Paul Manafort is probably going to spend the rest of his life in jail. Michael Cohen's going to go to jail for a long time. My guess is Mueller is using the power of the badge once again to try and get people to admit things that they didn't do. We see this now with Jerome Corsi, who, by the way, had no relationship with the campaign whatsoever. Roger Stone, who, claimed that he did something only to recant it, days or weeks later. By and large, these people had no relationship with the campaign, and Paul was there for a very short period of time. His crimes predate his tenure at the campaign by more than a decade, and he has to be held accountable for those. But it has nothing to do with the outcome of the election. The only candidate that took money and spent it overseas was Hillary Rodham Clinton when she took her law firm and they paid $5 million to a British spy to go come up with a false dossier that Jim Comey presented to Donald Trump in January of 2017, a completely unfounded document which had no business being presented, that he then leaked to the media so that he could say that the document was presented to the president-elect in a classified briefing. Jim Comey should be in jail today.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we don't hear a lot about that side. It's like no one's interested in this. But had this been the other way around, had it been a Republican that potentially asked for this spying on a campaign, I mean, this is an actual outrage.
Well,
I wish that the president would do more.
In our book, we asked the president, do you think Barack Obama knew of Crossfire Hurricane, which was the FBI's investigation into his campaign? And he says, yes, not only did Barack Obama knew, but if this happened to Barack Obama, what happened to Donald Trump and his campaign team, it would be called treason. The mainstream media would be all over this every day, and people would be in jail for 100 years. And the mainstream media's lack of interest in what took place to the people who are either volunteers or worked on the Trump campaign to be spied on by people with badges at the highest levels of law enforcement is the true hypocrisy. And he outlines that in our interview.
And I want to jump back to Michael Cohen and your reaction to that. So he pled guilty to making false statements to Congress about his efforts to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. So a lot of people might be looking at this and saying, oh, well, there's some sort of Russia connection, but there's nothing illegal about that. What happened is that he lied about the timeline of that, correct?
Well, probably lied about his name and lied about what day he was born in, lied about everything else, because that's what Michael Cohen does, because he's a liar. He's very good at lying about everything.
So you're not friends with Michael Cohen?
Look, I know Michael very well. He's a bad guy, okay? I never wanted to be around the guy. He's a liar. Roger Stone's a liar. Paul Manafort are liars. Have you seen the pattern here, right? These guys are all going to jail, are all liars.
And Michael Cohen had nothing to do with the president's campaign. Michael Cohen had no role, official or unofficially, with the campaign. He attended a few events. I think he spoke at one event over the course of a year and a half. This is not somebody who was an integral part, who did any legal work by far. The lawyers kept him as far away. Don McGahn kept Michael Cohen as far away from anything to do with the campaign as humanly possible. And so that's why guys like us, we don't worry about this. We get frustrated that the mainstream media builds this narrative about these rats, about these guys who do these things and lie and then get found out for it and are going to be paying the price. And that they build this narrative that it has to do with the Russia collusion operation. It has to do with Russia. It has to do with it's closing in on the campaign. These people didn't have, when I was there, I think I saw Michael Cohen twice. I never saw never saw Paul Manafort. I never talked to Jerome Corsi. These people were not players in the campaign.
Yeah. But, and Corey, you said that Roger Stone is a liar. That's kind of
factual based. Yes.
I mean, well, like, what is he lying about? I interviewed
his name,
him recently.
Look, Roger Stone first said, yes, I contacted WikiLeaks. And then he said, well, what I said and what I did are actually two separate things, right? First, he says he talks to Donald Trump all the time. Then he says, well, that might have, even today, he said, well, that might have been an exaggeration. I didn't talk to him all the time. I talked to him on a few occasions. Look, Roger Stone is a great self-promoter. He and Paul were business partners 30 years ago. They may be sharing a cell in the coming days. Who knows?
Yeah, I interviewed him recently, and he was saying that he didn't have any sort of direct knowledge from WikiLeaks and wasn't handing over information
that's contrary
directly to the Trump campaign.
Contrary to what Roger Stone said back in May and June when he said, yes, I have a direct relationship with WikiLeaks. Yes, we knew this was coming out. Now that Roger Stone is being called to the carpet for his lies and what he said he did and what his emails show, he's saying, well, I was just trying to, bring media attention to the story, because that's what Roger Stone does. I think him and Paul, who've been thick as thieves for 30 years together, are going to find themselves together again soon.
Well, that's interesting. And Corsi, obviously, I thought he was treated unfairly by the Mueller team. He was interrogated for hours and hours and hours. And again, this is that theme of investigating people and finding crimes. That's just my opinion on that.
Let's be honest. That's their job. I mean, to a degree, their job is to investigate, and they should uncover things that are reasonable and responsible. But to then be in search, which is to your point, of just anything to try to hang somebody out there, that's it's just not what these guys are supposed to do in the Mueller probe. And one of the things that we want to see is that the report, when it comes out, whenever that is, next month, next year, that it be made public. We think every American should have the right to see it, and I think transparency and sunlight is the best disinfectant here, because we're going to see just how political the Mueller probe is. Did the Mueller probe go into, as Corey was talking about, did he go into the payment of the $5 million, from Perkins Coie for the Russian dossier? What was Steele doing? What was Glenn Simpson doing with these other reporters who he had worked with for a long time? The Bruce Orrs of the world, the McCabe's of the world, leaking material to the reporters for single sources to go to the FISA court, to take that article to the FISA court and then spy on Americans. Let's see, because was there a conspiracy to do that, meaning legally a conspiracy? And that's what I think, that if the Mueller probe is going to be, held themselves out as following leads wherever they go, are they following those leads or just the ones that they want?
And really quickly, I don't know if you saw this, but Trump shared an image on Twitter, I believe, calling his opponents to face trial for treason, and many of the people were behind bars. It had Hillary Clinton, it had some other folks, I think Uma Abedin and a few others. What do you make of that? What type of message is President Trump trying to send with that?
First, I think he forgot several people. I think that's the big thing.
You did see it, right?
I only saw it for a minute as we came in, but
There seems to be, though, a double standard when it comes to the prosecution of people who supported Donald Trump and those that supported crooked Hillary Clinton, right? Huma Abedin, Cheryl Mills, all given immunity. Mike Flynn, who was he interviewed by? Do you remember? Mike Flynn was interviewed by Peter Strzok, and Mike Flynn answered his questions without an attorney present, and now many people in the FBI believe that what Mike Flynn told him was truthful, and Peter Strzok had a vendetta against Mike Flynn, and Mike Flynn pled guilty to something that was clearly designed to go after the Trump people, when Peter Strzok, who gave immunity to those same people, and Bruce Orr from the Justice Department had two separate sets of rules. So I think the president feels, and I think many Americans feel, It's very different if you support Hillary Clinton and you have classified emails that you share, or you want immunity even though you took a hammer and broke your phone with it. That's okay. Yeah. But if you're a conservative, we're going to go after you.
How that you could get away with something like that. No one would be able to get away with that if they were a conservative or not affiliated.
And look, in the book, we talk about how they found those emails on whom's laptop computer that they were going after Anthony Weiner, and they couldn't even, the FBI office in New York couldn't get permission from D.C. to read those emails because they were slow walking the system.
Amazing that I found on Anthony Weiner's computer out of
everywhere
in the world.
A lot of other things.
Really quickly, I wanted to give you a chance to, there was a special moment in the book that you said President Trump called you on Christmas Day. If you could tell us about that really quickly.
This is the part of Donald Trump that nobody knows. He's so gracious, he's so magnanimous, he's so friendly, and I am so grateful for what he's done for me and my family. We're sitting there at Christmas time, and my phone rang, and I looked down, and it was the president, and he just wanted to call and say thank you. And we talked for a minute or two, and then he said, no, I'd like to talk to the kids. And my kids are young, and it was so special that the President of the United States was calling to thank me and my family for the hard work. And, that's something that I don't think gets reported, how gracious he is, how kind he is, and how nice he is. And it was really meaningful to me because I'm just a regular guy who's been on an amazing ride. But to have the president call and thank me and my family for the sacrifices we made,
that's wonderful.
Meant a lot.
And you do hear those stories from time to time. People that are close to Trump will tell you those stories, how thoughtful he really is. And I just wanted to give you a little shout out for your book.
Thank you.
Dave, if you want to tell us where people can find it.
Thank you for doing that. It's on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, but it's in every bookstore. Please go visit your local bookstore and buy it from there because that's important to do.
Great. Well, thank you for being here with me and Corey.